It is Monday, October 3rd. This is the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm your host, Lance Glinn. Before we start, I just want to remind everyone to like this video and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening as a podcast, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. We have a special episode today. We usually bring you the West of the Rest on Mondays with Blair Angulo and Brandon Huffman. Don't worry, you'll hear from them on Tuesday. But for today's episode, we wanted to bring on 24/7 Sports Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, to discuss what was a very big weekend on the recruiting trail. Quite a few big games, was with some very big visit weekends throughout the country. And Steve, I want to get right into it. And I want to start with what was, in my opinion, the biggest game of the weekend, right? Clemson welcomed NC State. They beat the Wolfpack to really get, I guess, a grip on the ACC Atlantic. They had some big names, specifically in the 2024 class, on campus to see the game. So what can you tell us about the atmosphere those blue chippers got to see in Death Valley and their reactions to Clemson's big win, an impressive win on Saturday night?
Yeah, and Clemson, they got the number 8 recruiting class in the country in 2023. They're almost done with that. They still got a little bit of work to do, dot some I's, cross some T's on a couple other targets that they're working on here down the stretch. Tomarrion Parker's one, a top 100 player in the top 247 that's trending towards Clemson on the defensive line. Kayden McDonald's another major target. But this weekend was all about the 2024s, Lance. They're also looking for a running back in 2023. But this was all about the 2024s. They had 3 top 10 players in the country there this weekend. The number 1 linebacker, Sammy Brown, was back for his second game. This is a man that he knew that Clemson's defense held NC State to 3.7 yards per play. That's how into the game Sammy Brown is. He's been going to camp at Clemson for years. They were actually his first offered. Clemson doesn't normally offer till June of each year for that class. So they're always, like, from a standpoint of early offers, they're typically the last ones to jump in on a blue chipper. But their offer means a lot because they don't offer that many kids in general. And so the prospects know that, and they're recruiting the kids, they're communicating, they're talking. It's special to get that offer on June 1 from Clemson. And a lot of kids go to campus and get it in person. They offered Sammy Brown before June 1. It's one of the earliest offers of the Dabo Sweeney era. And it's because they've had him in camp for so long. They know him so well. So they made him the first offer in the class. They've gotten him there for a couple games this fall. He obviously loves Clemson. I think that Clemson's a major, major, major player for Sammy Brown. You have schools like Georgia in there, of course, Ohio State, Oklahoma, because, I mean, he's got a great relationship with Brent Venables for the same reasons, with Clemson. Tennessee and Ole Miss are a couple other players that are programs that I know have done a good job with Sammy Brown. But they had him there, and then they had KJ Bolden, who's the number 3 overall player in the country. He's been to Clemson several times in the past too. Talked about how it was electric, and left the game he wants to experience. He said, "I've always wanted to experience a big game in Death Valley at night, and man, it was an awesome experience." He told me we'll have more on that on Clemson 247. But he loved the fans cheering for 4 quarters. Clemson's recruiting him as a two-way guy. He's one of the best two-way players in America. Shines for Buford High there in the Peach State. That's you're not going to find a better coached high school football team in America than Buford. These guys come into college ready from a mental standpoint, and KJ Bolden goes both ways. That's hard to do for Buford, and he shines. He could play receiver or safety for Clemson, but he said he loves how Clemson always has a great quarterback to get the ball to their playmakers, and playing DB at Clemson would be like a dream come true with all the great DBs that have come through the prestigious university, he said as well. So no question, they're at or near the top of the list for KJ Bolden as well. And then the third top 10 guy, Lance, was quarterback Jadyn Davis. He's a number 2 quarterback in the top 247 player rankings. He's been going to Clemson camp since the 5th grade, so sort of like Sammy Brown. And the family talked to me about the new Jumbotron at Clemson. So I don't know if you noticed that last night, but I think that thing was lighting up like Las Vegas inside Death Valley when the sun set on that new Jumbotron. But that was impressive. But for Jadyn Davis, he's been to Clemson so many times, has a great relationship with Coach Sweeney and Brandon Streeter. He got his offer on June 1 in person, and that was like a dream come true for him. Clemson's one of his dream schools, Lance, and they got to spend a lot of time with Taj Boyd pregame, great Clemson quarterback. He took him around campus. It was one of his mom's first times really soaking things in, so it was an opportunity for her to see Clemson, and she works in education. She's a teacher, so education very important to her, and that fit. And so that was impressive. They got time with Dabo Sweeney and Coach Sweeney's wife pregame, and Coach Sweeney said, "Look, Jadyn's the one of just 2 quarterbacks we've offered in the world." That's how he enunciated it to Jadyn's mom. Again, it's hard to get a Clemson offer. And then the play on the field was great. They enjoyed seeing DJ Uiagalelei play well. His dad said that's a big brother, little brother type relationship that they have. So they were excited about that. And look, Clemson's a major contender for Jadyn Davis, Lance, alongside Michigan, where he's already visited for a game this fall. I think he'll get back to another game at Michigan. He's going to be at Georgia this weekend. He was at Georgia's opener against Oregon on a neutral site. They love Todd Monken and that pro-style offense. Pro development is going to be crucial in Jadyn Davis's decision. He sees that track record at Clemson with guys like Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, and then hopefully DJ in their eyes. And then, Georgia, they love that offense that Monken runs, and they think that's an offense that could prepare him for Sundays. And same with Harbaugh and Coach Harbaugh's track record. But LSU's in the thick of that one. North Carolina got a visit earlier this fall. That's an explosive offense. And then Penn State, he's going to be up there for the whiteout against Minnesota. So Clemson, they hosted a lot of elite juniors. There's a lot more of that on Clemson 247. I just wanted to highlight real quick that Anna Adams and I also crystal balled Tavoy Fegan to Clemson, top 247 defensive back. Talking to him, got the sense Clemson led for him as well.
And look, we know with Clemson and their quarterback recruiting and how well they do spacing out quarterbacks so that they're able to get blue chip after blue chip after blue chip. Obviously, I'm sure it helps the fact that DJ seems to have taken that next step this season and has clearly improved from last year, especially since you say they have such a great relationship. So I'm sure in the recruitment of Jadyn Davis, that's obviously very big as he sees DJ's improvement year after year. And now, Steve, I want to head over to the SEC, and Ole Miss, they hosted Kentucky for a top 15 matchup. They notched a big win against the Wildcats thanks to a big defensive stand after Kentucky got into the red zone. Lane Kiffin and the Rebels, they're 5-0 now, heading to Vanderbilt next week. On last Thursday's episode of the Football Recruiting Podcast, we actually had David Johnson on of InsideTheRebels.com to preview the big recruiting weekend for them. What'd you hear coming out of Oxford with Ole Miss putting together a very impressive showing in their win over Kentucky?
Well, talking to people that were at the game, man, the fans impacted that game, and the atmosphere was great for an 11 a.m. kickoff. Was that 11 a.m. in Oxford or noon? Or
I think it was 11 local, I think David said.
Yeah, but
you always got to be careful with those 11 a.m. local ones. Those are early.
Yeah, I love early games, Lance. I wish they all played at noon and then we could, get it all in. But, the home crowd helped Ole Miss beat Kentucky, win a pivotal SEC game, man. And they got plays in every aspect of the game to help them beat a very physical, good Kentucky team. And they had some key prospects on campus. They came into the weekend getting some good news on the trail. They landed a commitment from top 247 safety Braxton Myers, who at one point was a USC commit. His dad played at Alabama and in the NFL. And Braxton's a long, versatile defensive back that they coveted and never stopped recruiting after he committed to USC. So they got him to campus, they got him to commit. He's coming back later in the fall for his official visit. So the weekend already was off and running. They had top 247 offensive lineman DJ Chester on his official visit. DJ is one of the most coveted offensive linemen in America. And Ole Miss was really one of the first programs to prioritize him. He's ranked in our top 100. And he was at Florida State recently. LSU's had some momentum in this recruitment. They're a major contender. Michigan's in that for DJ's going up there later this month for his official visit to Michigan. But Ole Miss has gotten him to campus a couple times. And I talked to him a little bit during the weekend, and he was having a great time. He said it was real good, said the fans were crazy. I know talking to other people, it was an all hands on deck approach with him. I think that, he sees Ole Miss as a good situation. He's not going to announce till January, so Ole Miss will have to continue to chop wood there for DJ Chester. 4-star safety, 24/7 Sports composite 4-star safety Marvin Burks was on campus. He's a guy that my crystal ball has kind of come full circle for him, Lance, because I had it on Ole Miss early. A lot of Mizzou buzz for him coming into the season, and I'm certainly still not sleeping on Mizzou there for him. But just talking to Marvin and talking to people that spent time with Marvin in Oxford over the weekend, and I'll have a story up on our Ole Miss site either Sunday night or Monday morning. We're recording Sunday night, so we'll have that up, and you'll be able to check that out. But I think Ole Miss has really had a school that he's been attentive on. Now, I will say, when I was texting with Marvin Burks, he also told me, I'm watching a hell of a game on TV right now, and he's talking about Missouri and Georgia, and Missouri was up 10 at that time. Georgia obviously rallied, but he was paying close attention to that ball game after visiting Ole Miss. So, that recruitment might still be a war, but Ole Miss doing everything they can to land Marvin Burks. They'd love to flip recently minted top 247 4-star running back Donte Dowdell from Oregon. He's one of the most prolific running backs in American lands, and he's college ready physically right now to play. And I think he could compete in any room right now. And Ole Miss is obviously playing a true freshman at the position right now. But Dowdell, he's a guy that they would like to flip. They got his mom on campus this weekend, so they're going to continue to chop wood there. I talked to Dowdell's dad coming into the visit, and he said that, still locked in with Oregon, but anytime a visit happens and it's the in-state program, and the in-state program is playing at a high level,
got to pay attention.
And with an exciting offense, I'm not sleeping on Ole Miss there. We'll see what happens, but I'm being told by the family he's still good with Oregon. Jamonta Waller is a 2024 that Ole Miss is hoping that they can really make a move with as well, and they had him on campus this weekend as well. They're going to have a big recruiting weekend for Alabama in a few weeks, Lance, so I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about that leading up to it and then afterwards.
Yeah, and I'm sure for Dowdell, you mentioned the in-state program 1 and 2. I'm sure he sees the way that Lane Kiffin is using both Zach Evans and Kinshawn Judkins in tandem. So it's not just a one-back system. And you've got to think there's a good chance Zach Evans goes pro after this year. And if that's the case, an opportunity might be there for Dowdell to get some playing time early. And, Steve, you mentioned before the Missouri and Georgia game. And obviously that was a very good game. Missouri put up a very valiant effort. Obviously Georgia ended up rallying and got the win. But there was one prospect there, that I want to specifically mention, and that's Samuel Mpemba at IMG Academy. The third-ranked edge in the 2023 class, according to the top 247 rankings. He took a visit to Missouri for this past weekend's game as the Tigers took on Georgia. And, it's funny, Georgia is the team with the crystal ball lead for Mpemba. In fact, one of the crystal balls for him to Georgia was made by you. But what should we make of this visit to Missouri for him, specifically for the Georgia game? Because there's obviously a lot of connections right there.
Yeah, and we've seen Missouri beat Georgia for a blue chip recruit. They did it last cycle with Luther Burden, and that was, in my opinion, a real back and forth tussle because, I know that Luther was super high at Georgia, and Georgia was the leader in that recruitment at one point. I believe Georgia to be the leader in the recruitment for Samuel Mpemba still. I've not heard anything different, but we'll see what happens as this goes down the stretch. I expect them to be at Georgia this weekend. I have not had a source tell me that has changed or anything, but he's obviously looking around, talking to other schools, continuing to go through his process. But man, Georgia has just done an excellent job recruiting Samuel Mpemba. I think he really fits in with their commits. I think he loves the staff. Coach Chid, who has just kind of emerged as a great recruiter. Georgia's got one of the best off-field recruiting staffs in the country, David Cooper being one of them, and Coach Smart, Coach Schumann. They just, when they recruit a kid, it comes from all angles. It's very genuine. And then they have the product to sell. They just had an amazing NFL draft. They just won the national championship, and their players love being there. Samuel Mpemba's been there several times. Like I said, expecting him back there for the Auburn game this weekend. And Georgia is, in a terrific spot for him.
Yeah. And look, if you're a defensive lineman, and Georgia comes calling your way. I mean, how could you pass up playing for the Bulldogs, especially with what you've seen Kirby Smart do with that defensive line over last year? I mean, look, that defensive line lost a ton of talent last year, and they're still one of the best defensive lines in the country, and they rotate. So early playing time, I'm sure, is available if Samuel Mpemba decides to go to Georgia.
Lance, it was the whole defense too, man. They had 3 linebackers drafted, and now they have the best linebacker class in the country. 3 guys that we have ranked high, and the proof's there that, hey, you can come in with 2 other great backers and come out the other side and hear your name called high in the NFL draft. Look, they got an oil machine there. There's a few teams that, are just way more talented than everybody else. And they work at it on the trail by evaluating at a high level and then recruiting at a high level. You got Georgia and Alabama right there at the top. Ohio State and Clemson probably leading the next wave there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue to talk a little bit about Georgia on the other side. So keep it locked in here. You're listening to the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. Back here on the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast, Lance Glinn joined by Steve Wiltfong. So, Steve, before the break, we were talking about Samuel Mpemba and his interest in Georgia and how he visited Missouri for the Georgia game. But let's stick with the Bulldogs. They host Auburn this coming week. They currently sit at number 2 in the 2023 team rankings behind Alabama. And you reported on Sunday that Damon Wilson, the composite 5-star edge out of Venice, will be in Athens for the game on Saturday. A big visitor with a few schools standing out in his recruitment. And look, we just talked about Samuel Mpemba, another edge, and how he could go to Georgia, play early. And we've seen Georgia loves to rotate their defensive linemen and get them to the NFL draft and get them picked highly in the NFL draft. So where do you think Georgia right now sits with Wilson before the visit? And I guess on the second part, is it safe to assume we'll see the visitor list for Saturday's game against Auburn grow over the next few days?
No, absolutely. And you'll want to stay tuned to Dogs 247. Rusty Manziel, Kip Adams, and our national team will be dropping visitors all week. But 5-star edge Damon Wilson will take his official visit to Georgia. He had a great visit there this summer. Again, Coach Chidera Uzo-Diribe is leading the charge on Damon Wilson, who was near the top of Andrew Ivan's freak list. I'm not sure exactly where he fell in there, but he's one of the most explosive, powerful edge rushers in the country. His dad played at East Carolina and now owns a gym in Venice, and they train pro, college, and high school athletes there. And Damon Wilson's just extremely gifted. But they had a great trip to Georgia, and his first trip was there this summer, and it really moved the needle. And so, really connected with Coach Chid, had a good time talking with Coach Smart, said he was an easy person to talk to, said it was almost like talking to family on that trip, and then loves the scheme, and loves the family feel of the team, and loves the feel of the community. So many people talk about Athens, even like Arch Manning, when he went through his recruitment, he just loved the town of Athens. So if you're looking for a cool college town, that's another feather in the cap for Georgia. But, Damon took his official visit to Ohio State for their win over Notre Dame, and there was some talk from the family that might have been his last trip. And so Ohio State certainly well positioned, but Georgia trying to gain some momentum here from that summer visit. They've been all over him. Alabama got an official in the summer. They're in it. And then Miami, they're pushing as hard as they possibly can for him too to stay in state. So those are the 4 contenders, but we'll see what happens with Georgia and Damon Wilson this weekend. And then speaking of Wilson and speaking of visitors just being dropped there, a little quick tidbit, but we talked about Jadyn Davis being there. Ryan Montgomery's a 2025 quarterback that's highly recruited, that's going to return. Our buddy Blair Angulo, he reported today that Isaac Wilson, the younger brother of Zach Wilson, he's the number 7 quarterback in the country, number 53 overall from Draper, Utah, Corner Canyon. He's also going to unofficial this weekend. So Blair Angulo, you want to check out his story on that. But I'm expecting Georgia to have a massive recruiting list for that game against Auburn. And I think, Georgia's kind of been asleep for their last 2 games. I think we might see Georgia look the way they looked against Oregon when they come back around. I have a feeling that Coach Smart and company are going to be getting into the players a little bit this week. Now they've showed resiliency, and you never take a win for granted. It's hard as hell to win games in college football. It's hard as hell to win at night. And Mizzou,
I feel like there's always that one game for every team, right? Every team has that one game where they just, especially a team like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson. You feel like they always just have that one game where, hey, this is the game to get them, but yet here they are once again coming out with a win, always sneaking it out, always rallying, always making the big stop when they need to. And I feel like that's exactly what happened against Missouri on Saturday night.
It was never I knew Georgia was going to win the whole night. I never was worried that they were going to lose. It was exciting to see Missouri play well. Coach Drink's one of the coolest guys in college.
We had him on the College Football Daily actually last year, and he was great interview.
I did one of those. What were those things that we called those COVID interviews?
Yes.
Social distance. I did one with him. He's awesome, man. And so it's fun to see good things happen to Mizzou. But Georgia grinded that win out, and but they didn't play well against Kent State. So I would imagine that Coach Smart and company are going to get them right for an Auburn team that really they had a chance to knock off LSU. It's hard to win, man. And so
trust me, as a Rutgers fan, Steve, I know it's hard to win.
Man. You need to go back to the Big East.
No, I want to stay in the Big Ten for as long as we can. But trust me, I know how hard it is to win. And speaking of the Big Ten, before we move on to our final team, TCU, and we will talk about the Horned Frogs for sure. But before we move off of the Big Ten, on Sunday night, Wisconsin decided to fire Paul Chryst in a move that I feel like wasn't as surprising as it may have been weeks and weeks ago. Obviously, Wisconsin got rolled by Illinois this past Saturday. Wisconsin recruiting is not what it once was, or at least they're not at the level in which they should be in the Big Ten West. They are faltering on offense.
They're boring.
They're boring. Braylon Allen did nothing in that game, and partly because he didn't really get many carries. Graham Mertz has certainly not lived up to the hype that he got as a recruit. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was the highest rated quarterback recruit for Wisconsin when he committed there. But what do you think about Paul Chryst getting the axe at Wisconsin and kind of where the program goes from here? Because they're kind of in limbo now when it comes to both on the field play and recruiting as well.
Well, there wasn't much of an emphasis on recruiting the last two cycles, which is just sad because, man, they had the nation's number 16 recruiting class in 2021. And, man, they were in the 40s last year. They're in the 50s this year. I don't think they put much effort into it. They have not recruited the quarterback position very well. And then their offense is even worse, man. So, I just want them to get an exciting guy in there. Lance Leipold makes the most sense to me. And, Kansas is 5-0. Are they? Yeah, they're 5-0.
5-0.
They got
Jayhawks, Steve. 5-0. Come on.
Lance Leipold's the only coach in college football that I've drank coffee with and had a cocktail with. So he's up the Wiltfong list.
What was the cocktail? Do you remember the cocktail?
Oh yeah. I mean,
what was the cocktail?
I mean,
you got to let us know.
Almost 40 years old. It's not like we're throwing back, 18 cocktails, but he, first of all, is not a classier guy out there than Coach Leipold. He is just, a cool customer, man, that just treats people well. And, he obviously has the Wisconsin Whitewater roots where he was 109-6. 109-6.
Unbelievable.
I don't care what level you are on. That is some good coaching. 109-6 at a school where I don't know if they give scholarships. So you really have to recruit and develop. Obviously, had a lot to sell eventually. When you're 109-6, you're probably winning a lot more recruiting battles because your school's got an exciting product. But Lance Leipold, I'd be all in on him if I'm Wisconsin to get him back there and see what he can do. Obviously, he knows the high school coaches extremely well there. One of the other people when we were drinking the cocktail was one of the best high school coaches in the state of Wisconsin was with us. So he's got those relationships there. I'm not saying look, my wife would easily say Lance Leipold for Wisconsin. So it's not like this is the hot take of the year, but just giving some more background there. The high school coaches know him and probably love him. He understands that state and how to find talent. He understands how to develop talent. You see how the Kansas players talk about him. He's a guy that cares for his players. He's a player's coach. He puts them in. You see how hard they were playing at the end of the year last year.
Insane.
You beat Texas because you're playing hard. So Lance Leipold, I don't even, there's so many great options out there that could do a good job. He just makes so much sense, man. And he like Kansas they hit the portal hard. Like whatever the recipe is, he'll do it and bring people together. That's what he does. He brings people together, turn Buffalo into a winner, and that's a hard place to win. Not a harder place to win than Kansas, you know.
And they're hosting game day next week,
which is awesome.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And look, man, they beat Duke's 4-1. How about the Fighting Mike Elkos over there with the Blue Devils, man? And you know, he waited a long time to get his shot, and they're ripping and roaring in Durham. And but Wisconsin, Lance Leipold, for the high school, the connection to the high school coaches that he still has cocktails with at the coaches conventions, and you know, for what he's done at every program he's ever been at. He's an ultimate winner. And I think at Wisconsin, he could turn the Badgers back into the class of the Big Ten West, which, you know, right now is kind of up for grabs after Purdue beats Minnesota, you know, and so I would have said Minnesota's the favorite, right? You know,
but Iowa's not what Iowa, you know, their offense is boring. Wisconsin, like you said, their offense is boring. Illinois, you know, maybe they're taking the next step. Obviously, rolling Wisconsin.
Especially like Ibrahim's not in the lineup from Minnesota, right? So that stung this week. They felt that one, right?
Absolutely. And you know, with Leipold, it'll be so interesting because obviously he was a hot name when the Nebraska job opened up. So if you get a Big Ten West battle of Nebraska and Wisconsin both going for Lance Leipold, and obviously Kansas is going to do everything they can do to try to keep him. So he's.
I love that Lance Leipold is the man right now, though.
I will tell you.
This guy's legit. You got a lot of guys that get a lot of smoke because of their personality.
He's great.
Or their agents are stumping for him. Like Lance Leipold is the working man that worked at Whitewater and then Buffalo and then Kansas. Nothing's ever been handed to him, man. He's gone out and grinded. You know, he's never wearing Carhartt gear. And not the trendy Carhartt that the students at Kansas are wearing.
Yeah.
This man's wearing Carhartt gear his entire career. He's the working man that treats people well, coaches his football team up. And I really think at Wisconsin, he would do a fantastic job and really take a program that's just gotten boring. They're just turned into a boring team, man. The offense is on a stone tablet like that you could see in the Hanna-Barbera Flintstones episode. It's probably the same thing, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing with Leipold, before we move on to TCU, is back in 2019, Rutgers played Buffalo at Rutgers and blew Rutgers out of the water. I don't remember if it was Chris Ash's last year or second to last year, but as soon as Chris Ash got fired, there was a small contingent or large contingent that wanted Greg Schiano back, in which case ultimately ended up happening, but a small contingent that wanted Lance Leipold. And besides the fact that he and I both share a name, which obviously, you know, makes me first and foremost a big fan of his, I was very much for the Lance Leipold hire. I wanted Greg Schiano back too, which obviously, like I said, ended up happening. But had they gone the Lance Leipold route, I would have been very happy with that. And who knows where Rutgers would be if they had hired Lance Leipold? Who knows if he'd still be the head coach of Rutgers at this point?
Rutgers is tough, man. It's in the Big Ten East. Chris Ash could have got Syracuse and chose Rutgers over Syracuse for the recruiting inroads.
Steve, don't bring me back to those times.
But Syracuse is the easier place to win than Syracuse.
Well, the ACC, Big Ten. You're comparing ACC to Big Ten, which obviously, you know, there is, frankly, in my opinion, no comparison, to be honest. But we do need to discuss one more team. And this team, look, they put on a show as they routed Oklahoma, and that is TCU. The Sonny Dykes era is off to a strong start on the field. The Horned Frogs are 4-0. They're right on the edge of a top 25 class, sitting 26th, which is good for 5th in the Big 12 right now. I think it's safe to assume that recruits came away pretty impressed with the performance. And if TCU does make its way into the top 25 in the recruiting rankings, we may be able to point at this past weekend as one that made a big impact in that happening. What are you hearing out of Fort Worth and from the recruits that witnessed that 55-24 win over the Sooners?
Well, first, I'm pumped that our guy Max Duggan, a former top 247 recruit, is shining. And it's just it's a coach's game. You know, you get good coaching, it makes those recruiting rankings look a lot better than when, you know, high-ranking guys pick schools that don't do a good job developing people. Then it's kind of a crapshoot, you know. But Max Duggan's in Coach Dykes' offense, he looks like a Heisman candidate. He looked like a Heisman candidate against Oklahoma, that's for sure, man. And they got the number 2 offense in the country. Max Duggan's the trigger man. They're the other team on game day as they take on the Fighting Lance Leipolds.
What if I told you TCU and Kansas in week 6 of the college football season would be on college game day?
Well, we could have had Kansas Duke, man.
That's true.
But TCU's got an exciting style of football in a state that's just stacked with receivers and running backs and quarterbacks that like you can mine for talent in the Lone Star State and find guys that can run and make plays. You can find quarterbacks that play in great offenses because it's the best high school coaching collectively in America. So those quarterbacks are seasoned players and certainly running backs. And so, but look, man, one of the recruits said the energy there, it's unmatched. And TCU being undefeated is exciting. We'll just talk about a couple targets there in the 2023 class. TCU is looking for their first top 25 class since 2020. Mikal Harrison-Pilot is a top 247 athlete recruit that they're recruiting on offense. He loved his experience and had a good time there. And then Warren Roberson is a 4-star safety that at one point was a heavy trend to USC. I like where TCU's at and logged a crystal ball for the Horned Frogs there. So they need to, they're looking for help on defense. But offense, man, you just figure under Coach Dykes and company and what's available in that state that they got a chance to be prolific every year. And hell, maybe they can, take the place of Oklahoma as that prolific Big 12 offense with Oklahoma going to the SEC. TCU, I could see stepping up and being that school that's getting 500-600 yards a game and lighting up the scoreboard and playing a fun, exciting style. But they're 5-0, and I think that they'll win in Kansas. I just think they'll have too much.
You heard it here first, folks. You heard it here first.
But you never rule out, you never count out the Fighting Lance Leipolds and the Kansas Jayhawks. But this was a lot of fun, man. And so thanks for talking a little recruiting and football with me here.
No, absolutely. And thanks for coming on. The director of recruiting for 24/7 Sports, Steve Wiltfong. And like I said, Steve, obviously always a pleasure having you on. So remember to like this video and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. So for Steve Wiltfong, I am Lance Glinn. Thanks for listening to another episode here on the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast.